So we've had many sessions on the show that have been very technically focused. But how often do we really think about accessibility, not just in our products, but when we're having discussions like this, when we're giving presentations or talks? Well, it's an important aspect because there are lots of people who are going to have various types of difficulties, whether that is hearing, whether that is sight, or whatever kind of accessibility issue that they may have. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of Cloud with Chris. Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you for joining. We have got a very, very interesting session, a very important session here today. If for some of you who know about the journey I've been on with Cloud with Chris, making the website more accessible for screen readers, for example, this is another equally important topic for me to have on the channel. And we have a brilliant, brilliant guest here today to talk all about this, Kai Sauter, who will be talking all about why closed captions in public speaking can really make a difference. So you know the deal. If this content has been useful to you, please hit like, please subscribe to the channel, please hit the notification bell so we know when you want to see more of this type of content, and we can get other great speakers to talk about some of these types of challenges here as well. So with that, let's go and introduce our guest for this session. Let's introduce Kai. Hello, Kai. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you.
Good.
How are you?
All good, thank you. Good. And as we said before going live, really, really pleased to have you on the show and looking forward to learning.
Likewise, I'm also very happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Excellent. So let's start with some introductions, Kai. Who are you?
Well, I'm Kai Sauter. I'm a PI consultant at Untitled AG, which is a small boutique consulting firm. We do several stuff like insurances and banking, and most of my customers are in banking, actually. I've been working with data since 2008, and my primary focus are SQL Server, Power BI Server, SSES, and Azure. Like already actually hinted, I have a disability. I have Cochlear Implants. That means I'm actually deaf. That means there are implants in my ear, both over ears actually. And well, I like to travel all around of the world. At the moment, not so much anymore during the pandemic at the moment, unfortunately. But still, I would like to go again, actually.
Absolutely. I think we're all looking forward for conferences and yes, travel opportunities.
Definitely, absolutely. And I also organize an event called Data DGIF, which happens every month, once on a Friday, just to celebrate the end of the week and start the weekend that way. And I live in Zurich, Switzerland.
Excellent. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And again, looking forward to talking about this topic. So talking about closed captions in presentations, public speaking, and why they're important. And, you know, not strictly a cloud topic for the session today, but I think an important one. Accessibility is something that all of us have a responsibility for. It's something that is important because if we're not actively trying to include everyone, we're inadvertently not including some people. So it's something that we all need to be very conscious of when we're presenting.
Well, I would also argue it's also a bit about cloud because, for example, if you use Microsoft Teams
yes,
as a client to present or also to interact with other people, then there is a functionality that is built in that the user like me actually can switch on and use, and I'm also using it right now. That's why we're also looking at a bit down to read and see what's actually being said, because there's actually captioning live what you are saying, Chris.
Indeed, exactly. And it's a good point. I think before cloud, this type of technology that we're using to actually go and have this discussion is very difficult to obtain, very difficult to build, because of the power of cloud, because of the power of data and machine learning and some of these other technologies. We have technology that can transcribe what I'm saying live, so that you can have this great experience here. So it's a great evolution of technology.
Absolutely.
Good. So then maybe let's start by setting the scene a bit, why it's important, and talking about some of your experiences, perhaps.
Yeah. The why is statistically, if you talk about the statistics that are published by WHO, about 5%, actually more than 5% of the world's population, this is estimated around 430 million people, are hard of hearing in some form. There are several forms of it. It's not just like black or white. It's basically really has graduates of all forms. Some people have, for example, hearing loss in lower frequencies, and others have hearing loss in higher frequencies. For me, I'm completely deaf. Actually, I was born deaf. Actually, that means actually I used to hear some limited amount of had a hearing. I used it with normal hearing aids that most of people actually are aware of. So we know this and just put it in. This amplifies the sound, and I will come to back probably later why it also has its limitations. But those used to help me until I was 19 years old and had then actually sudden hearing loss. So even deaf people can have a sudden hearing loss actually, with that I didn't hear nothing anymore. So the only solution back then was actually the cochlear implants, which are still in use today.
Gotcha. Understood.
You also can acquire hearing loss if you are exposed to loud sounds, like in disco or or using headphones that are too loud for your ears, basically. And also can explain this because within the ear there's actually a muscle that actually tries to hold the middle ears bones that transmit the sound in the ear. And if you are listening too long sound, of course, this muscle also gets tired and has to let go at some end. Which is also why if you have a sudden loud explosion, something like the explosion or like a gun or something like this, you might also risk to have the hearing loss, because this muscle may not be fast enough to pull and to stop the strength of the sound wave that is actually hits the inner ear. Or if you are too long in a disco, for example, then the same thing happens after some while.
Yeah, understood. And I think there's even other scenarios as well, because thinking of myself, actually, I don't have hearing loss or hard of hearing, but I have an audio processing disorder. So in scenarios where there's a lot of noise and a lot of background noise, my brain struggles to focus on one person speaking or one specific area. So again, this type of closed caption scenario would help me in certain use cases as well, actually. For people who maybe are not native language speakers, it helps them as well. So there's so many use cases actually where this is so important to be inclusive and accessible for many different people from different backgrounds.
That's interesting. I didn't know that this actually exists, but I can just tell from my experience with cochlear implant or also with normal hearing aids, you have basically the same problem.
Yes.
We actually don't know today why this is the case, because actually, especially if you have conventional hearing aids that actually just amplifies the sound to the level when you can hear again up to the level it hurts. So if you even if you have normal hearing aids, you can't just amplify as much as you want, because at some point, even if you have a hearing aid hearing loss, then you also may have hurting experience if it's too loud. Actually, it's just even if you don't hear it that loud, it's just what you experience.
Yeah, understood. It's again, it's all about this different experience, as you say, and I think for folks who haven't had that experience, it can probably be quite a challenge to try and understand how that feels.
Yeah. The same is effect you have actually if you have tinnitus, which is the
Mm.
ringing in the ear. This is also a disorder you may experience. A lot of people know it after they went to disco or had an accident with the gun, or just a loud exposure accident like this. They also hear some ringing or some whistling or something like this that is in the ear. And of course, if you don't have both ear, because maybe it's just one ear, then it also gets much harder to hear in noise. So the better said to understand in noise. Actually, both ears are quite important to understand in noise. It's also why we actually have two hearing aids usually given to the people, so they understand the other people better in noise.
Yes, understood. And something interesting that maybe some people don't know, some people don't realize. You mentioned about hearing loss doesn't need to be, I think, from birth. It can be something that happens at later life as well. So even though you've gone through some of your life, or someone has gone through some of their life with hearing, for example, they can encounter this as well.
Yeah, I think I have a slide where it also lists other causes of hearing losses.
Mm-hmm.
This is here, there's no really sharp definition. It's really, it can depend on the age, and it's quite fluid. For example, if you, of course, are 80 years old, you won't be able to hear that much anymore like you used to in your 20s, basically.
Yep.
It's generally, but the WHO says above the hearing loss above 20 decibel, which is just it's they say around 30 decibel is about as loud as a whisper. So
Ah,
20 decibel is actually something that can't hear because it is loudness, because I hear everything above 30 decibel. This is actually technically um, limitation that I have. Technically, I could say I want to hear everything,
mm,
but the problem is with the cochlear implants, you have basically 22 electrodes in your ear.
right.
In contrast to that, you have about 10,000 hearing cells in your ear. So it's for the frequencies and it's also the loudness. This is everything is done by those hearing cells that transform the kinetic energy of the sound, there's moving energy basically into electric energy that goes to the nerves, because the nerves actually run over electricity, so the signal goes to the brain. And this way, those 22 electrodes just put per induction a signal on not one nerve, but just an area of nerves, because the structure is so small. Actually, you can't do it that small. You have to imagine that the inner ear is only as the size only the size of a rice corn. So
Okay.
you have to put basically an electrode into the rice corn in this size, and this is very delicate, very small. So they don't have this range basically. But now, yeah, like we said,
Fascinating.
it also can be acquired in life. It also could be there are actually also medication that induce hearing loss.
Oh, wow.
I've met the person once that needed to have antibiotics that to save his life basically, because he had a severe sepsis, and because of that he lost his hearing.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's quite amazing and worrying all at the same time. Wow. Okay.
yeah, so or an accident. I also know people who had an accident, a car crash. I used to know someone who had a cycling accident, went into a car, and that day he lost hearing. Yeah,
Gotcha.
also, yeah.
Understood. But I think what impressed me, there we go, talking about technology, was some of the things you were just talking about there, and the preciseness, the delicate way that the cochlear implants, for example, are working. Very precise, very, very impressive technology.
It is extremely interesting. I'm also a nerd in this field. I have to maybe to say that I actually founded two national associations in Switzerland. I was a board member in three national associations in Switzerland. One of those associations was actually only for cochlear implants. Another was basically just to raise awareness that deaf people not just um, do sign language, because actually I, as for one, I can't do sign language. But there used to be an association in Switzerland that was against cochlear implants and stuff like this. So
Wow.
we actually had to create an association that to make the government clear that they need to pay for us, the insurance needs to pay for us the cochlear implants or the hearing aids and whatever. So that was quite also important for this. And over the course of almost 25 years, no, it's also about 30 years now, of course, I accumulated some knowledge about this. Well, hearing aids, like I said, is just sound counts, amplify, and stuff like. So it has basically three limitations. One limitation is, like I said before, that the loudness can't be amplified infinitely, just because at some point the user will experience pain. That's the limitation.
Yeah.
So even if you had a good loudness, and even if it also could be that the person only hears a whisper, basically, but it still has pain. So that's really a limitation that is here. Another limitation you have is that if you have a hearing aid, you can imagine that basically you have to put something into the ear that is called autoplastic. And the
Right.
autoplastic is designed to shut the door basically through the ears, because if you don't do that, the microphone would hear itself. But at some point, of course, if it's not closed enough, it's well enough, how to say this in English? My native language is German, so dicht, waterproof, also soundproof. As if it's not
Yes.
soundproof, it's basically then it would hear itself, which means it goes to a loop. This is what if you have a microphone and it's are close enough to a loudspeaker, you will hear it. It's a beep, and this is what also this is another limitation. The third limitation we still have today is battery. The battery power is always a limitation. So people don't like to wear a bigger pack of battery somewhere in the body, but behind the ear. So you have to, as an engineer, you have to go around that. And of course, how much power you can actually get from that battery.
Understood.
This is, of course, more or less true for all the technologies here. The only thing that's quite different here is Cochlear implant and auditory brainstem implants. Because a Cochlear implant does not amplify, it actually doesn't amplify because it just transmits a signal and transforms it to electrical signal, basically. We don't have this feedback problem but we have another problem here. The ear is quite close to the facial nerve. That means if you have a too strong signal, basically, then you have two problems. Either you hit the facial nerves, which can again hurt you. It actually can trigger a facial nerve, and it could also induce some movement into your face, or it just hurts. This is one limitation we have. And another is that you could really imagine this is an electrode that you put an electrical field around it. So it's actually a spheric thing, basically. And because of that, if you have a nerve, of course, you don't hit just one nerve, but several nerves, basically. So you have also the problem to get a clear signal, basically.
Yes.
This is so you will hit not just one nerve, but maybe 50, or 100, or 1,000, I don't know, something like this. So you have also a limitation here. Cochlear implants, however, interestingly, is the most successful technology for deaf people. So it's actually, if you really don't hear anything, but you still have a hearing nerve, that means a nerve that goes from the ear to the brain. If this is available, then you can use Cochlear implants. And many people, not all the people, but many people are even able to phone with it. I, for example, I can also phone with it. So that means I don't need to use lip reading, for example, which also helps me actually. But let's say with most people, I can actually talk without a problem. There are people I can do that less because, of course, also it depends how clearly they speak and stuff and like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's also a bit harder for me. So auditory brainstem implants, I already hinted about it. It's used when you don't have this hearing nerve. So this, for example, if you had an accident, then you can use an auditory brainstem implant. Or if you had to cut the hearing nerve for some reason, very common reason is a cancer. This is called neurofibromatosis type 2, so which means sometimes you have to also to cut the nerve to take the cancer out. So what it does, auditory brainstem implant means is you open the skull, put basically the implant directly into the brain. But here you have the problem that you have to find basically the spot where your hearing center is, and also this is where you process the language.
Yes.
So and the problem is it's not so easy to do that. And it is also with cochlear implants, you actually just put it in the cochlear. But you really can imagine it as a snail. Basically, in a snail, you put it in, and you have basically three wines, 3 rounds. Basically, so you can go around. With the cochlear implants, you can get around half of it because it's, like I said, it's just too small. At some point, you can't go deeper. Actually, you only have half of it. But with the auditory brainstem implant API, in an API, you basically just have basically a cell lump you have to find and put it in and hope you hit it. But with the CI, cochlear implant, with the CI, you basically have a structure where you actually are very well aligned to the nerves you want to hit.
Understood. It's fascinating the amount of technology that exists to help make hearing accessible, whether you're hard of hearing or have had hearing loss. My girlfriend Katie, she works in audiology, so works a lot with hearing aids, etc., and tells me a lot about some of the technology. But it's really just fascinating hearing you talk about the spectrum almost of the different technologies that are there. Hearing aids to amplify for hard of hearing and slight hearing loss, or cochlear implants or auditory brainstem implants for complete hearing loss and being able to help with that. It's just so impressive, the technology, when you consider the size of the devices as well, typically.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing.
I can show it. This is basically just this size. This is also absolutely amazing to me that today this battery here, this is literally a bit longer than half of my small fingers. I have pretty small fingers. And this lasts actually 1 day. So basically, it's actually the past. I used those battery cells, which basically just a button basically, and those buttons only lasted maybe 1/2 a day basically. That means I used to exchange them during the day because those were just too expensive to say I will throw away them in the evening, and so it is good to happen in a phone call or in the cinema or something. I just had to replace during that time, and now they just can when I go to bed to sleep, I just recharge them and it's done. Don't have to take care of it anymore. That's really great.
That's amazing. Again, showing how technology can advance and really make that an accessible experience. I think something interesting in what you said there, though, as well. If you are in a discussion and let's say, you had some of those technologies where the battery did die and maybe you didn't have a spare battery, this is again why things like closed captions are so important. Exactly. Because at that point you wouldn't be able to rely upon that technology.
Exactly. And it's also important to note not everyone has access to those technologies actually. I was born in 1979, which means it was just after the microchip was invented. And just when I was 2 years old, I was one of the first generations to receive actually hearing aids with those microchips, which also made them those hearing aids much more powerful. This means also you have to have access to them because one hearing aid could be easily $6,000. So this is also the work for an audiologist, like you said, included. This also, this is also work. Also the plastic I mentioned, everything like this. For cochlear implants, there is an example. That's can be, it's even more expensive. This is around, they say, around 30, 50,000
Wow.
US dollars. So this is actually because you would have to have a surgery. Basically, you have the technology. You also need rehabilitation because after a cochlear implant surgery, it's not like you switch on and you hear everything like I do, but you have to relearn the experience, which is why actually kids who get the cochlear implants very early on, they actually learn very quickly with this. And with the Cochlear implant, you have to relearn it because, like I said, you have only 22 throats, and if you were hearing with a conventional hearing aid before, then you have to transition this hearing experience first, and this it can be a quite long process for some people.
Yeah. And I can even imagine experiences through life can be quite challenging as well. You mentioned about it can feel like quite a lonely process. I think, or rather, I can imagine the systems that we use day to day are all based around hearing, are based around conversation and people discussing and engaging with each other. How is that experience for you, I guess, and growing up?
Well, yeah, it can be lonely. That's you get disconnected. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I was just realizing that I was here. The screen. Okay.
All good.
I was going to say, yeah, it can actually be disconnecting. Of course, there was a famous saying by Immanuel Kant that says, "Seeing disconnects you from seeing, and hearing, if you're deaf, not being able disconnects you from people." And this is actually quite true because, of course, if you see things, you can't experience around the world. But if you don't hear, also have the the plan to participate with other people, like we said before, especially loud environments.
Yes.
Like in some, there are, for example, conferences in which they have breaks, and during those breaks, they have music. So what I will do is basically I will guide the people I want to speak with along first to a quieter place, so I can understand them more easy. And this is also can be a strenuous process because, of course, if you have to listen so hard every day and also all day long, then it's also means that in the evening you might try to retire yourself basically because if you are at work and all day just exposed to people working today, so it means maybe you can't attend another dinner because you're just too tired. That's also true. Yes.
Yeah. And I can somewhat relate to that off what I said earlier with my audio processing challenges as well. When I get tired, I find it hard to focus in on one particular voice. Like if I'm with a group of people and everyone's talking, trying to focus on one person is hard. And there are times where I've said to my girlfriend, or she can kind of see me back out of the discussion because I don't quite keep up. And I think what you've just said there, Kai, around conferences is a really great example of something where so many people, they wouldn't think about having music on in the background. They wouldn't think about the impact of that. That's a great experience. It's a great thing. But actually, for people who are hard of hearing or have hearing loss, that does negatively impact their experience there.
Yeah, when I was in school, of course, as a student, as a teenager, I was often asked if I get to a disco, and I said, "Why? I want to talk with people. So why would I go to loud environment, and I was never a huge fan of music. It's actually only the last maybe 10, 15 years I start to enjoy music more. But it's not like that I always have to have music on. And luckily, my wife also doesn't enjoy the too loud music either. Sometimes she has it on, that's fine for me too. But also then at some point, maybe tell her maybe jot it down when we're having dinner and have a conversation. So yeah.
Understand. And I guess with everything we're talking about here, there are obviously things that can be done to help people with these challenges. You know, we've talked about closed captions, for example. You gave the great example about the music with the conference as well. Let's maybe explore that a bit.
Yeah, like I said, we already said the listening can be a strenuous process actually, and also this also comes down in the education, of course. In also in other ways, not just because you are tired. I'll give you another example afterwards. So yeah, let's talk about the discrimination, especially in schools. For me, at least in Switzerland, it can happen actually, or at least it happened in the past, that you couldn't go to gymnasium. Gymnasium is basically the school which you to do your final exams that lets you go to university. I think that's junior high, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So when I wanted actually to go gymnasium to the school, actually two schools, public schools, which my in the area denied me to go to school because I'm deaf. That was the only reason. So I had to go to a private school basically, which my parents had to fight for the payment for, and they only won in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court decided that the government has to pay for me for the private school, which is of course is actually nonsense. And after I went to do a Federal Institute of Technology to study computer science, nobody was caring about it anymore, basically. However, I was not finishing it because, like I said, this is really a strenuous process, actually. And as if you have a topic that is very abstract in technology. We remember back then we didn't have Wikipedia, where I just could go. It was in 2001. Just to search a topic which I didn't understand, so we have to buy books and stuff like this. It was much more harder to do this back then. It was also just before the dot-com bubble burst, which also meant that there were extremely a lot of students. They were actually overrun back then, actually. So we were 300 people in one room, and so it was too loud for me to understand the professor. So also was a reason why actually I stopped it. But now I'm in the process to my Master of Advanced Studies in Business Intelligence at the university. This is much easier also because it's smaller classes. This is the Fachhochschule is a university for applied sciences in Zurich. So this is smaller classes. With the pandemic, it's also my luck a bit that also because we have now everything with Microsoft Teams. I don't have any noise around me because everyone is sitting there from their screens and get muted if they are too loud and stuff like this. It's much easier. That's just a coincidence now. But yeah, this makes it a lot easier.
Have you found, since everything with coronavirus and COVID-19, that in fact the way that I guess technology, Teams, for example, has grown significantly. Have you found that become almost not a level playing field? Maybe that's the wrong term, but it feels easier to have some of those discussions because you don't have some of these discriminations, for example, like in the normal environment.
Well, um, yes and no. I mean, at the moment, Microsoft Teams only supports live captioning for English, and the classes are not held in English.
Okay.
But it's still a lot of better for me nowadays.
Yeah.
However, for conferences, if I attend a conference where we also, of course, learn a lot of stuff, let's say like last week at Tativerse or something like this, that's really helping me a lot because, of course, if people have, for example, a thick accent like I do with my German accent, it also helps me to understand. So now you have a very proper, nice British accent, which I understand honestly very well. So it's also have a very good microphones. So it really helps. Not everyone has this kind of technology. Not everyone has this kind of very understandable voices. The live captioning really helps. However, I also know that I just checked today for another question that in August, this August, actually Microsoft Teams should be published with other languages for live captioning. Yeah.
Good. It's just really interesting listening to you speak and hearing. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm fortunate to have my hearing. Yes, I have this processing disorder, but the challenges that we're talking about here and the discrimination actually that you mentioned about with like just quite frankly being accepted into school, something that so many of us take for granted and just as something very basic, is just really, really, I don't know, it's not something I've ever experienced, so it's really a wake-up call, I think, and I hope that anyone listening in is also listening to this and thinking about what they can do to help make that a more equal experience, I think. Wow. So I guess then, yeah, exactly. Here we go. What can we do? How can we help? How can we be allies and help?
Yeah, if you actually try to be more accessible in general, doesn't apply to hearing only, of course.
Yes.
You broaden your audience. I mean, this is like I said before, at least 5% of the audience profited from it. So, but it's not only hard of hearing; it also applies to you. I'm not sure if you identify yourself as a hard of hearing. Basically, it's just yeah. Actually, also on Twitter, I asked people today if they actually know the technology of Microsoft Teams, and some people said they wouldn't know, but when they actually, and other people actually said, even if they were hearing, sometimes also for a thick accent, it helps them to understand what the people are saying, or when the words are not so captured clearly, it also can be corrected. Of course, if you don't have a caption for some reason, because maybe you are using another product than Microsoft Teams, then you also can use maybe at least say some hint words put into the chat. That helps also a lot, because if you actually jump from one topic to another, it also can be hard to understand what's actually being talked about, because you have always to remember, if you don't hear clearly, for example, you miss some words maybe, and those words you have to fill the gaps with the brain, basically.
Yes.
But you have to do the all day long, all night long, and if you have to do that also a lot, then of course, then it's a strenuous process. It's really helpful to just put maybe a chat or maybe names, for example, is also something like this. If you have a name that is for a product, let's say, then some products have a funny name that or don't really have a meaning. For example, then you're even if you're a normal human person, it's helpful to write it down. So say, oh no, that's what the person meant. Maybe I've read it before, but I don't know how it's pronounced.
Understood. And I understand. I completely appreciate what you're saying there about the cognitive load that gets added when you're trying to fill in the gaps and fill in the blanks. And just even turning on captions, as you say, gives you at least something to work with. Captions aren't always perfect. We know that. But at least it can help bridge some of that gap and help you work towards filling some of the difference there, I think. Understood. And it's interesting the point at the bottom there as well about algorithms like YouTube prefer captions.
Absolutely, yes. If you don't use captions on YouTube, you actually have to, on YouTube, you have to switch it on, basically. At some point, I'm not sure anymore. When you first set up, I think you can say, I will have per default, will have captions. And once you have this on, basically, then the captions is available. If you have the captions, then you have a better searchability in YouTube. So because of course it's in words.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easier to look you up. So yeah. Okay. Just check there if there's another slide. I wasn't sure anymore.
Good. No, I think this has been a really enlightening discussion, Kai. I think, and I hope at least, that anyone who listens in when the recording and the video goes out, that they really listen and think and read and watch about the experiences here that we've been talking about. There are things that I wouldn't have even thought about because of my own experiences. I didn't have some of those experiences like you had, for example, just to go to school. Something that I took very much as just something that was part of my life, that something was very much expected of anyone, but actually a very different experience for yourself. And I think that's something we can all reflect on, and that we can think about how we can do more, quite frankly, to make it a more accessible experience for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for supporting the course.
No, thank you. And again, very enlightening. Very pleased to have you come onto the channel, join and talk about this very important topic. And I'm sure, no doubt, we can talk even more about this in the future as well. So Kai, thank you very much. And I hope we get a conference where we can actually speak in person soon in the future. Let's hope.
Yeah. Hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you. So there we go, folks. We have been talking all about accessibility, talking all about how we can do more with closed captions, and thinking about our entire audience. Not 95% of our audience, not 90% of our audience, but 100% of our audience, and thinking about how we are accessible to everyone. Now, as Kai mentioned, it's not just about those who are hard of hearing or have had hearing loss. There are many different types of disabilities and accessibility issues that we can think of, and this is really the start of our journey. So as always, if you've enjoyed this type of content and learning about Kai's experiences, please hit the like button, please subscribe, please hit the notification bell. This is something very important to me and something I want to include more of on the channel, and I'd love to know what you'd like to see, if there are any areas of accessibility you'd like to focus on as well. So as always, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next episode, thank you for joining, and bye for now.